They picked the wrong veteran to mess with on the wrong day. William Johnson had been driving the same route to the VA hospital every Wednesday for 6 months. Same time, same roads, same destination. Routine was important for managing his PTSD symptoms. But this Wednesday morning, as William approached the intersection of Maple Street and Veterans Boulevard, he found his carefully maintained routine shattered by a wall of bodies, signs, and righteous indignation. The protesters had been there for 3 weeks, blocking the main road connecting residential neighborhoods to the medical district. William had heard about them on the news, something about environmental justice. He'd even supported their cause in principle. The right to peaceful protest was one of the freedoms he'd fought for in Iraq. But sitting in his Honda Civic, watching 50 people link arms across the intersection, William felt his jaw tighten. He was already running late. William checked his watch. 9:47 a.m. His appointment was at 10:15, and the alternative route would take 40 minutes. He'd already rescheduled twice due to work emergencies. Dr. Williams had been understanding, but William knew consistency was crucial for his treatment. The nightmares had been getting worse. He rolled down his window and tried to catch the attention of the nearest protester, a young woman with bright purple hair and multiple facial piercings. "Excuse me," William called out respectfully. "I need to get through. I have a medical appointment at the VA hospital." The woman looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "So does everyone else. That's what they all say. Take another route." "There isn't another route that won't make me late," William replied, maintaining his composure. "I'm a veteran, and I need to get to my counseling session." Her expression hardened. "Being a veteran doesn't make you special. We're fighting for all communities here, not just privileged ones who think they deserve special treatment." William felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not anger exactly, more like the focused calm that had kept him alive during 2 tours in Mosul. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for basic access to medical care." "Then you should have thought about that before choosing to live in a system that oppresses marginalized communities," she shot back. "Maybe this inconvenience will help you understand what it's like for people who don't have your privileges." William sat back in his seat, processing what had just happened. In Iraq, he'd taken shrapnel to save a convoy of civilian contractors. The purple scar on his left shoulder throbbed with the memory. And now this young woman was lecturing him about privilege while preventing him from accessing the medical care he needed to function. He pulled out his phone and called the VA hospital. "Hi, this is William Johnson. I have an appointment with Dr. Williams at 10:15. Yes, I need to reschedule again." The receptionist's voice was sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, but Dr. Williams is booked solid. The earliest I can fit you in is April 18th. 3 weeks. William thanked her and hung up, staring at the human barricade. Something had shifted inside him. The helplessness he'd felt moments ago was gone, replaced by something he hadn't experienced in years: purpose. The war might be over, but William Johnson was about to start a new kind of battle. William Johnson sat in his apartment that night, 3 cups of coffee growing cold beside his laptop. The missed VA appointment felt like a lifetime ago. What started as frustration over a blocked road had evolved into something deeper, a puzzle that demanded solving. He'd always been good at puzzles. In Iraq, analyzing intelligence patterns had been his job-finding threads that connected seemingly random events. As William scrolled through social media posts and public records, he began seeing a pattern around citizens for change. The first red flag was timing. 3 weeks ago, there had been no mention of Citizens for Change anywhere online. No website, no social media presence, no history. Then suddenly, They were everywhere: professional Facebook pages, slick Instagram accounts, and a Twitter feed posting around the clock. William clicked through their content, taking screenshots. The posts were polished, clearly created by someone with marketing experience. High-quality graphics, perfectly formatted text, strategic hashtag usage. This wasn't college students organizing in dorm rooms. But the funding caught his real attention. William ran a whiz lookup on their website. The domain had been registered 1 month ago, paid for with a corporate credit card linked to Progressive Advocacy Solutions, LLC, a consulting firm specializing in grassroots organizing and social media management. He dug deeper, following corporate breadcrumbs through Delaware shell companies and tax filings. The trail led to a name that made him pause: Rebecca Thornton, daughter of tech billionaire David Thornton. According to a Forbes profile, she'd been quietly funding activist organizations through intermediary consulting firms. William pulled up the Citizens for Change permit application. They'd claimed to be a local grassroots environmental group with a $5,000 budget. But the equipment he'd seen: professional sound system, high-quality banners, matching t-shirts, would have cost at least $20,000. Cross-referencing the permit revealed another problem. Derek Martinez, their organizer, had only moved to the city 6 months ago. Yet they'd claimed local status. A Google search revealed Derek's LinkedIn profile read like a resume for manufactured outrage. He'd organized similar protests in Portland, Seattle, and Austin over 3 years, working for various consulting firms that traced back to progressive foundations. William researched the supposed chemical plant they were protesting. It existed but 15 miles away in an industrial district, having nothing to do with their intersection. The real story was more interesting. The city had recently approved a veterans center near where protesters were stationed. Digging deeper, William found the opposition. Victoria Ashford, president of the Riverside Neighborhood Association, had hired lobbyists to fight the Veterans Center, arguing it would decrease property values. Her association had received a $50,000 grant from the Thornton Foundation. The picture crystallized. Rebecca Thornton had purchased a $5 million mansion in Riverside 8 months ago. The Veterans Center would be half a mile away. She was funding fake protests to create traffic problems, making the area seem unsuitable for the facility. William opened a new document and began typing. Citizens for Change. A case study in astroturfed activism. For 3 hours, he compiled everything with military precision: financial connections, corporate structures, permit violations, false official claims, all documented methodically. But documentation wasn't enough. William needed proof that would survive scrutiny and counterattacks. He called Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist from college. Despite the late hour, she answered on the 3rd ring. "Sarah? It's William Johnson. I think I've found something you'll want to see." "What kind of something?" "What would you say if I told you that protest blocking Veterans Boulevard is funded by a billionaire's daughter trying to stop a veterans center?" Pause. "I'd say you better have documentation. Bank records, corporate filings, permit applications, and 20 pages of analysis. Coffee tomorrow morning? Make it 7 a.m. at Morrison's Cafe. And William, if this is as big as you're making it sound, be careful. People who manufacture grassroots movements don't like being exposed." After hanging up, William walked to his window, looking out at city lights. Somewhere out there, Derek Martinez was planning tomorrow's protests. Rebecca Thornton was sleeping peacefully in her mansion. Veterans were being denied medical access because of manufactured crisis. Not for much longer. William Johnson had never lost an intelligence battle. This wouldn't be his first. William Johnson sat across from Sarah Chen at Morrison's Cafe, watching her eyes widen as she reviewed his investigation. Morning commuters grabbed coffee around Themony, who would soon encounter the Citizens for Change blockade. "This is incredible," Sarah said, looking up from the documents. "You've unraveled their entire operation in one night." 20 years of intelligence training helps, William replied, sipping black coffee. "The question is, what do we do with it?" Sarah was already photographing key documents. "I can have an article ready by tomorrow morning. Front page, full exposé." "That's a start," William said. "But I think we need to be more strategic. If we just publish an article, they'll deny everything, claim persecution for their activism. So what are you suggesting?" William leaned forward. "We use their own tactics against them. Social media, grassroots organizing, viral content. We expose them the way they manufacture outrage, methodically, strategically, with maximum impact. You want to wage an information war. I want to wage a truth war," William corrected. "They use lies and deception to manipulate public opinion. We'll use facts and evidence to expose that manipulation." After leaving the cafe, William set up his war room dining table, covered with documents, laptops, and multiple monitors, displaying social media platforms, news sites, and research databases. His strategy was simple: document and share. William created a Twitter account under his real name, clearly identifying himself as an Iraq War veteran and cybersecurity professional. No hiding behind anonymity. This was about credibility and accountability. His first tweet was direct. "I'm the veteran blocked from VA medical care yesterday by Citizens for Change. Here's what I discovered when I investigated who's really behind this grassroots protest." He attached a thread revealing specific evidence: corporate registration documents. The funding trail: Derek Martinez's professional activist background, Rebecca Thornton's real estate holdings. Each tweet was factual, verifiable, and shareable. Within an hour, the thread was shared dozens of times. Veterans organizations retweeted it. Local residents added comments about being affected. Real grassroots engagement was spreading organically. William created similar content for Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, tailoring each platform's characteristics. LinkedIn focused on professional astroturfing aspects. Facebook emphasized community impact. Instagram used infographics, making financial connections visually clear. His phone started ringing around noon. First call: Jake Morrison, his old squad leader. "Dude, I saw your posts. Some rich kid is paying protesters to block your VA access." "That's exactly right, and it affects thousands of veterans regionally. What do you need?" "Share the content. Get word out through veteran networks. Send information to anyone in media or politics who might be interested." Jake didn't hesitate. "Consider it done." The second call was Derek Martinez. "Mr. Johnson, I understand you've been spreading false information about our organization online." William had expected this. "Everything I've posted is documented and verifiable. Which part do you claim is false?" "You're suggesting we're not legitimate grassroots, which is completely untrue." "Really? So Progressive Advocacy Solutions didn't pay for your website? Rebecca Thornton's foundation didn't fund your operation? You haven't organized identical protests in 4 other cities?" Pause. "I don't know where you're getting information, but..." "Public records, Derek. Corporate filings, tax documents, permit applications, all available to anyone who knows how to look. You need to stop this. You're interfering with our right to protest. I'm exercising my right to free speech by sharing publicly available information. Same right you claim to be exercising. If you don't stop, we'll take legal action. Good luck. Everything I've shared is true and documented. What law do you think I'm breaking by sharing public records? Derek hung up. 20 minutes later, blocked number. Mr. Johnson, this is Rebecca Thornton. I think we need to talk. Miss Thornton, I was wondering when you'd call. Perhaps we could meet and discuss this reasonably. I don't have concerns about Citizens for Change. I have documentation showing it's a front organisation funded by your foundation to stop a veterans centre near your property. Long pause. What do you want? Stop blocking veteran medical access. Stop lying to the public about motivations. Stop manufacturing fake grassroots movements. And if I refuse, then I'll continue sharing the truth. Your choice. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Mr. Johnson. I have resources and connections you can't imagine. William smiled. Miss Thornton, I've been shot at by people actually trying to kill me. I'm not particularly intimidated by threats from someone who pays others to do her fighting. She hung up. By evening, William's posts had been shared thousands of times. Local news was picking up the story. The truth was spreading faster than manufactured outrage could contain it. William Johnson woke to his phone buzzing incessantly. The clock read 6:23 a.m. and he had 17 missed calls. As he reached for the phone, he heard voices outside his apartment building. Looking down from his window, William saw 30 protesters gathered on the sidewalk, holding signs, reading Stop the Smear campaign and Veterans Against Veterans. The same purple-haired woman who had dismissed him at the intersection was speaking into a megaphone. William Johnson lives in this building, she announced. He's the one spreading lies about our movement, trying to silence our voices with military propaganda. They'd brought the fight to his doorstep. William checked his voicemails. Mixed with legitimate calls from reporters and veterans were several that made his blood run cold. First, a distorted voice. You need to stop what you're doing, or there will be consequences. Second, more specific. We know where you live, work, and get medical care. Back off. Third, most chilling. PTSD is a real tragedy. It would be terrible if something triggered an episode that hurt innocent people. They were weaponizing his mental health condition against him psychological warfare of the most personal kind. His phone rang. Sarah Chen. William, are you seeing the news? They're claiming you're having a mental breakdown, that your PTSD is making you paranoid and delusional. I'm seeing it firsthand. They're protesting outside my building. This is what I was afraid of. They're trying to discredit you by attacking your mental health. It's not going to work, William replied steadily. I documented everything. Evidence speaks for itself. They're also claiming you threatened Derek Martinez during yesterday's call. William laughed bitterly. Of course they are. After hanging up, William made coffee and considered his options. Hide and wait for protesters to leave, hoping the story would die, or fight back. The choice was easy. William opened his laptop and typed a new social media post. The protesters outside my building this morning prove my point better than any investigation could. When you expose manufactured activism, they don't engage with evidence, they attack the messenger. The fact that they're trying to weaponize my PTSD shows exactly what kind of people we're dealing with. He attached photos from his window and screenshots of threatening voicemails. I served my country overseas, and I'm proud of that service. I also live with PTSD, and I'm not ashamed of that either. But I won't be silenced by people who think they can intimidate a veteran into backing down from the truth. The post went viral within an hour. Veterans organizations condemned the harassment. The optics were terrible for citizens, for change protesting outside a veteran's home, while he exposed their financial backers. His phone rang again. Mark Peterson, his CEO. "William, we need to talk. I've been getting calls all morning. Someone's claiming you're using company resources to harass activists. They're threatening to pull business if we don't take action." William felt his stomach drop. "Mark, you know me. I would never." "I know, William, but I'm getting pressure from our board. They're saying this is becoming a distraction." "Who's making these calls?" "I can't tell you that. But William, you need to resolve this quickly." Rebecca Thornton was attacking on multiple fronts, using her network to pressure his employer while organizing protests to make him look unstable. But she'd made a critical mistake. She'd underestimated how the veteran community would respond to attacks on one of their own. William's phone buzzed with texts. "Jake Morrison. Saw the news. The whole unit is mobilizing. We're not letting them do this to you." Maria Santos. "My VFW post is organizing a counter-protest. We've got your back." Tommy Rodriguez. "My wife's a lawyer. She wants to talk about the harassment and threats." By noon, the scene outside William's building had transformed. Original Citizens for Change protesters were still there, but now outnumbered by veterans and supporters. Military families, VFW members, and ordinary citizens affected by road blockades had joined the counter-protest. Signs had changed from "Stop the Smear campaign" to "Support our veterans" and "Stop fake activism." William watched Jake Morrison approach the Citizens for Change protesters in dress uniform, voice carrying combat authority. "You want to protest? That's fine. But you're going to do it respectfully and stick to facts." This man served his country with honor and earned the right to speak truth without harassment. William decided to make an appearance. He walked downstairs, approaching the veteran supporters. "I want to thank everyone for coming, but I don't want this to be about me. This is about something bigger, the right to know the truth about who's really behind movements affecting our communities." The manufactured solidarity was crumbling. Truth was doing exactly what William hoped, destroying their artificial unity from within. The escalation was complete, but William Johnson had survived worse than billionaire intimidation tactics. William Johnson stood in the VFW Post 847 parking lot, surrounded by 30 veterans who had volunteered for what they called Operation Truth Shield. Morning sun cast long shadows across asphalt as William outlined his plan. "This isn't about politics," William said, his voice carrying combat authority. "This is about veterans' right to access medical care and citizens' right to know when they're being manipulated by manufactured activism." The veterans nodded. These were men and women who had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, and every conflict between. They understood the difference between legitimate protest and manufactured outrage. Jake Morrison stepped forward. "We've obtained proper permits for counter-demonstration. We're positioning ourselves at the intersection, not to block traffic, but to provide safe passage for veterans and anyone else needing to get through." Maria Santos raised her hand. "I've been tracking missed medical appointments because of these protests. In 3 weeks, 247 veterans have had to reschedule. 12 were for crisis intervention services." The number hit William like a physical blow. 12 veterans in crisis, unable to access help because of Rebecca Thornton's manufactured protest. "That stops today," William said firmly. The group moved out in convoy pickup trucks, motorcycles, and SUVs, many displaying American flags and veteran organization decals. They weren't starting a fight, they were finishing one. When they arrived, Citizens for Change protesters were already positioned. But something had changed overnight. The group was smaller, maybe 20 people instead of 50. Several familiar faces were missing, and remaining protesters looked uncertain and demoralized. Derek Martinez was arguing with the purple-haired woman, voices carrying across the intersection. "We're losing people," she was saying. "Half the group didn't show up. They're saying if we're really funded by some billionaire, they want nothing to do with it." "It doesn't matter," Derek replied unconvincingly. "We have commitment to the cause." "What cause?" "Yesterday, I believed we were fighting environmental racism. Today, I don't know what to believe." William watched with satisfaction. Truth was destroying their artificial unity from within. Veterans took positions along intersection sides, creating a corridor, allowing traffic flow, even if protesters remained. They wore military uniforms, carried American flags, and held signs reading "Veterans for Truth" and "End Fake Activism." But William had more than physical presence planned. He'd spent the night monitoring Citizens for Change communications with his cybersecurity skills, discovering devastating evidence. He pulled out his phone and began broadcasting live on social media. "Good morning, everyone. I'm here where Citizens for Change has been blocking medical access for 3 weeks. I want to show you something interesting." William held up printed screenshots of text messages between Derek Martinez and Rebecca Thornton's representatives. "These are messages from last night, discussing damage control and narrative management. They're not talking about environmental justice. They're talking about spinning exposure of their funding sources." He read directly, "The veteran situation is becoming a problem. We need to escalate pressure on him personally. Make it about his mental health, not our funding." Murmurs went through the crowd as they realized what they were hearing. "And here's another, from Derek Martinez to his handler. Some of our people are asking too many questions. We may need to end this operation earlier than planned." Remaining Citizens for Change protesters looked at each other in shock. They hadn't known about private communications between leadership and funding sources. Derek Martinez pushed through the crowd, face red with anger. "Those are private communications. You have no right to intercept them." "Actually, I do," William replied calmly. "When you use unsecured communication methods for public demonstration, those communications become public record. But more importantly, your own people have a right to know who's pulling the strings." Derek pulled out his phone and made a call. "We need the backup plan, now." Within minutes, 3 police cars arrived, followed by an ambulance. A young woman William had never seen was lying on the ground, apparently suffering some medical episode. "She's having a seizure," Derek announced loudly. This veteran's harassment triggered a medical emergency. William watched with growing suspicion. The timing was too perfect, the performance too orchestrated. He kept recording as paramedics attended to the woman. The lead paramedic was taking vitals, and William caught fragment of conversation. "Pupils normal, blood pressure fine, no signs of actual seizure activity." The paramedic looked at Derek skeptically. "Sir, I'm not seeing evidence of medical emergency. She appears perfectly healthy." "She was having a seizure. We all saw it. I've been a paramedic 15 years. I know what seizures look like. This isn't one." William turned back to his live stream, now with over 2,000 viewers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed what appears to be a staged medical emergency, designed to discredit veterans providing safe passage for people accessing medical care." Remaining Citizens for Change protesters were openly arguing among themselves. Several walked away, disgusted by what they'd witnessed. The counter-strike had succeeded beyond William's expectations. The manufactured protest was collapsing, truth was spreading, and veterans were getting medical access again. William Johnson sat in Martinez, Chen, Associates Law Office, watching attorney Lisa Martinez review his compiled evidence. The office was modest but professional, with law books lining walls and certificates documenting Lisa's civil rights experience. "This is extraordinary," Lisa said, looking up from documents. "You've essentially documented a conspiracy to violate civil rights using manufactured activism as cover." William had met Lisa through Tommy Rodriguez, whose wife had recommended her. Lisa specialized in veterans' rights cases and had a reputation for taking on powerful opponents who manipulated the system. "The question is whether we have enough for federal civil rights lawsuit," William said. "They've clearly violated my right to access medical care, but proving intent might be challenging." Lisa spread documents across her conference table. "Actually, I think we have more than enough. The private communications you intercepted show clear intent to deny medical access to veterans. The threatening phone calls constitute intimidation. The false permit applications represent fraud." She picked up one screenshot William had captured during his live broadcast. "This message from Derek Martinez is particularly damning. The veteran situation is becoming a problem. We need to escalate pressure on him personally. That's evidence of deliberate targeting based on your veteran status." William felt vindicated. After days of being portrayed as a paranoid veteran having a mental breakdown, it was refreshing to have a legal professional confirm his analysis was sound. "What kind of damages are we looking at?" "That depends on how far we want to take this," Lisa replied. "We could file for individual damages related to your missed medical appointments and harassment, but I think we should go bigger." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began sketching strategy. "We file federal civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983, claiming conspiracy to deny equal access to medical care. We add RICO charges for the organized nature of fraud, and we seek class action status to represent all veterans affected by road blockages." William raised eyebrows. "RICO? That's for organized crime." "RICO applies to any organized enterprise engaged in pattern of criminal activity," Lisa explained. "Rebecca Thornton's foundation, Progressive Advocacy Solutions, and Citizens for Change form an enterprise. False permit applications, fraudulent fundraising, and conspiracy to deny civil rights constitute the criminal pattern." The scope was staggering. William had started trying to get to a medical appointment. Now, they were talking about dismantling an entire network of fake activism. What are the risks? Lisa's expression grew serious. "Rebecca Thornton has resources we can't match. She'll hire the best lawyers money can buy, and they'll try to drag this out until we run out of money. They'll also continue their character assassination campaign, probably more aggressively. And the benefits? If we win, we set precedent protecting veterans' access to medical care and exposing the astroturfing industry. We also send a message that billionaires can't manipulate communities with manufactured activism." William thought about 12 veterans who had missed crisis intervention appointments. He thought about the purple-haired protester who had genuinely believed she was fighting for justice until learning the truth. He thought about all other communities that might be targeted by similar operations. "Let's do it," William said. Lisa smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. I'll start drafting the complaint today. But William, once we file this, there's no going back. They're going to come at you with everything they have. They're already doing that. At least this way, we're fighting back." After leaving Lisa's office, William drove to the VFW post, where Jake Morrison and several other veterans were waiting. The post had become their unofficial headquarters for Truth Shield operation. How did it go? Jake asked as William entered the meeting room. We're filing federal civil rights lawsuit, William announced. Class action, RICO charges, the whole 9 yards. The room erupted in cheers and applause. These veterans understood the significance of taking the fight to federal court. Maria Santos raised her hand. What do you need from us? Documentation. Every veteran who missed appointment because of blockades. Every family affected. Every business that lost money. We need to show the full scope of damage they caused. Consider it done, Maria said. I've been keeping records since this started. That evening, William's phone rang. Sarah Chen. William, I just got off the phone with Rebecca Thornton's publicist. They want to offer you a settlement. What kind of settlement? $50,000 to pay for missed medical appointments and therapy sessions. In exchange, you agree to stop making public statements about Citizens for Change and delete your social media posts. William laughed. 50,000? They spent more than that on their fake protest operation. There's something else. The publicist made it sound like this was their final attempt at reasonable resolution. Meaning, if I don't take the settlement, they're going to escalate. That's the implication. William looked back at the VFW post, where fellow veterans were discussing strategy. Sarah, I'm not taking it. This isn't about money anymore. The legal maneuvers were just beginning, but William Johnson was ready for whatever came next. William Johnson stood on federal courthouse steps, surrounded by news cameras and reporters. The manila envelope in his hand contained 127 pages of meticulously documented evidence that would change everything. Lisa Martinez stepped up to microphones first. Today we're filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Rebecca Thornton, her foundation, Progressive Advocacy Solutions, and Citizens for Change. The evidence shows deliberate conspiracy to deny veterans access to medical care through manufactured activism. William watched reporters scribbling notes and adjusting cameras. Behind them, Jake Morrison and a dozen other veterans stood in formation, their presence a silent reminder of who this fight was really about. The plaintiff, William Johnson, is an Iraq War veteran, denied access to his PTSD counseling because of road blockages orchestrated by this network. Lisa continued, but he's not the only victim. We have documentation showing 247 veterans missed medical appointments, including 12 needing crisis intervention services. A reporter raised her hand. What evidence do you have that this was deliberately targeted at veterans? Lisa nodded to William, who stepped forward. For a moment, he felt familiar tightness in his chest that came with public speaking. But then he thought about veterans still missing appointments, still afraid to travel through the intersection. The evidence speaks for itself, William said, voice steady. We have private communications between organizers discussing the veteran situation as a problem to be managed. We have financial records showing the fake grassroots organization received over $200,000 in funding. And we have permit applications containing false information about their local status and budget. He held up a printed screenshot. Quote, the veteran situation is becoming a problem. We need to escalate pressure on him personally. That's not the language of environmental activism. That's the language of targeted harassment. Another reporter spoke up. What's your response to claims that you're simply trying to silence legitimate protest? William had expected this question. I served 2 tours in Iraq defending the right to protest. I have no problem with legitimate activism. But I do have a problem with billionaires manufacturing fake grassroots movements to manipulate local politics. He pulled out another document. Rebecca Thornton purchased a $5 million mansion in the Riverside neighborhood 8 months ago. 1 month later, The city approved a veterans center in the same area. 2 weeks after that, Citizens for Change suddenly appeared with professional equipment and sophisticated media strategy. The timeline isn't coincidence, William continued. This was calculated effort to create traffic problems that would make the city reconsider the Veterans Center project. They used environmental justice as cover story while actually fighting to protect property values. After the press conference, William's phone started buzzing with notifications. The story was spreading across social media, picked up by veteran organizations and news outlets nationwide. But it was Tommy Rodriguez's call that got William's attention. "William, you need to see this. Rebecca Thornton just held her own press conference." William pulled up the live stream. Rebecca Thornton stood in front of her foundation's headquarters, flanked by lawyers and PR representatives. She wasn't the composed billionaire heiress William had expected. Her carefully styled hair was slightly disheveled, and dark circles under her eyes couldn't be hidden by makeup. "The lawsuit filed today is a desperate attempt by a mentally unstable veteran to silence legitimate environmental activism," she began, reading from prepared remarks. "Mr. Johnson has been harassing peaceful protesters and spreading conspiracy theories about our organization." William felt his jaw tighten at the mental health attack, but kept recording. "Citizens for Change is legitimate grassroots organization fighting environmental racism," Rebecca continued. "The fact that they receive foundation support doesn't change their authentic commitment to social justice." A reporter interrupted. "Miss Thornton, how do you respond to evidence showing your foundation funded the organization through intermediary consulting firms?" Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. "Many foundations use consulting firms to manage grants. That's standard practice. But the organization claimed to be local and grassroots on their permit applications. Were you aware they were making false statements to city officials?" "I'm not involved in day-to-day operations of grantee organizations," Rebecca replied, voice lacking conviction. But it was her final statement that provided William with exactly what he needed. "Mr. Johnson is a disgruntled veteran who can't accept that his community doesn't want his kind of facility in their neighborhood," Rebecca said, her mask finally slipping completely. "The Veterans Center would bring crime and instability to a peaceful residential area." The reporters erupted with follow-up questions, but Rebecca's handlers quickly ended the press conference. William called Lisa immediately. "Did you see that?" "I saw it. She just admitted the real motive. It's not about environmental justice. It's about not wanting veterans in her neighborhood. And she did it on camera, in front of dozens of reporters." Lisa's voice carried satisfaction. "William, she just handed us our case. A billionaire admitting she doesn't want veterans in her neighborhood while funding fake protests that deny them medical access. That's exactly what we need to prove discriminatory intent." Within hours, Rebecca's comments were trending on social media. Veteran organizations condemned her statements. Politicians issued statements supporting veterans' rights. The exposure was complete. The truth was spreading faster than Rebecca Thornton could contain it. But William Johnson knew that cornered enemies were the most dangerous kind. The war for truth was entering its final phase. William Johnson woke to his phone buzzing incessantly. The bedside clock read 5:43 a.m., and notifications were coming so fast his phone practically vibrated off the nightstand. Something big had happened overnight. The first message was from Jake Morrison. "William, check the news. Now." The second from Sarah Chen. "Rebecca Thornton just got arrested. FBI raid on her foundation. This is huge." William sat up, suddenly wide awake. He opened his news app and saw the headline that would change everything. FBI raids Thornton Foundation in astroturfing investigation. Billionaire heiress arrested on federal fraud charges. According to the article, the FBI had executed search warrants on the Thornton Foundation offices, Rebecca Thornton's mansion, and Progressive Advocacy Solutions headquarters at 4 a.m. Rebecca had been arrested at her home and was being held pending arraignment. William's phone rang. Lisa Martinez. William, are you seeing this? I'm seeing it, but I don't understand how this happened so fast. Your lawsuit triggered a federal investigation, Lisa explained. When we filed RICO charges yesterday, it apparently prompted the FBI to accelerate an existing inquiry. They've been watching this consulting network for months. William felt vindication mixed with disbelief. They were already investigating? Apparently, our case was the final piece they needed. The evidence you compiled, combined with their ongoing investigation, gave them enough for arrest warrants. What are the charges? Lisa's voice carried satisfaction. Mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and racketeering. William, they're looking at decades in prison if convicted. As the morning progressed, more details emerged. The FBI had seized computers, financial records, and communications from all three organizations. Derek Martinez had been arrested at his hotel, along with 3 other professional activists who had worked on similar operations across the country. But the scope of the investigation truly stunned William. According to the federal indictment, Rebecca Thornton's network had operated fake grassroots campaigns in 12 cities over 5 years, targeting not just veterans' facilities, but also affordable housing projects, public transportation initiatives, and community health centers. William drove to the VFW post, where veterans had been monitoring news coverage. When he walked into the meeting room, the entire group stood and applauded. "You did it," Jake said, clapping William on the shoulder. "You brought down the whole network." "We did it," William corrected. "All of us. This wouldn't have happened without everyone's support." Maria Santos stepped forward with documents. "William, I've been tracking the impact. Since the arrests were announced, 17 veterans have already called to reschedule appointments they missed. Word is spreading that it's safe to use the intersection again." The sense of relief was palpable. For the first time in weeks, veterans could access medical care without fear of harassment or delays. But William's satisfaction was tempered by a call from Dr. Williams. "William, I wanted to update you on something disturbing we've discovered. As we've been documenting missed appointments for your lawsuit, we've identified a pattern that goes beyond road blockages." "What kind of pattern?" "Veterans who tried to speak up about the protests were targeted for harassment. Phone calls to their employers, false complaints to VA administration, even anonymous tips to local police claiming they were unstable." William felt his blood run cold. "How many veterans?" "At least 30 that we've identified so far." "William, this wasn't just about blocking a road. It was systematic intimidation designed to silence any veteran who might oppose their operation." The implications were staggering. Rebecca Thornton's network hadn't just blocked access to medical care. They had actively targeted individual veterans who tried to resist. "Dr. Williams, would you share this information with the FBI?" "Already done. Agent Sarah Kim called me this morning. The Bureau is very interested in the veteran intimidation angle." William spent the rest of the day fielding calls from reporters, fellow veterans, and legal analysts who wanted to understand how a single veteran's determination had unraveled a multi-million-dollar astroturfing operation. As the day continued, the most damaging revelations came from seized communications. According to FBI leaks, Rebecca's private messages showed clear awareness that her operations were targeting veterans specifically because they were seen as vulnerable to manipulation due to PTSD and other service-related conditions. William felt sick reading the quotes. Rebecca Thornton had deliberately exploited veterans' mental health conditions as part of her strategy. But the financial scope shocked everyone. The FBI had traced over $5 million in fraudulent grants and donations related to fake grassroots operations. Rebecca had been using her foundation's tax-exempt status to fund a nationwide astroturfing enterprise. The reckoning was complete. Rebecca Thornton's empire of manufactured activism was collapsing under federal investigation weight. But William Johnson knew the real victory wasn't putting one billionaire in prison, it was establishing precedent that would protect communities from similar manipulation in the future. 6 months after the arrests, William Johnson sat in the federal courthouse witness gallery, watching Rebecca Thornton enter her guilty plea. The woman who had once commanded a $50 million foundation and orchestrated fake grassroots movements across the country now stood before a federal judge in an orange jumpsuit, her empire reduced to ashes. Miss Thornton, Judge Patricia Harrison said, reviewing the plea agreement, "You understand that by pleading guilty to conspiracy, racketeering, and civil rights violations, you're facing a minimum of 8 years in federal prison." "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca replied, her voice barely audible. William felt a complex mix of emotions watching the proceedings. This wasn't revenge, it was accountability. Rebecca Thornton was facing consequences for deliberately targeting veterans and manipulating communities across the country. Lisa Martinez, sitting beside William, leaned over and whispered, "Derek Martinez's testimony was devastating. He provided documentation of similar operations in 18 cities." William nodded. Derek's cooperation with federal investigators had revealed the full scope of the astroturfing network. In exchange for his testimony, he would serve only 3 years in prison instead of the potential 20 he faced. Judge Harrison continued reading the charges. The court finds that the defendant organized a criminal enterprise that defrauded donors, violated civil rights, and deliberately targeted veterans seeking medical care. The harm to communities and individuals was extensive and calculated. As part of his plea agreement, Derek had testified that Rebecca Thornton specifically instructed him to target veterans' facilities because veterans were politically sympathetic but often isolated and struggling with mental health issues that could be exploited. The testimony had been difficult for William to hear, but it confirmed what he'd suspected. This wasn't just about property values. It was about deliberately exploiting vulnerable populations for political and financial gain. After the hearing, William met with Agent Kim in the courthouse lobby. The plea agreement requires Rebecca to pay $43 million in restitution, Agent Kim explained. $20 million goes to communities that were targeted, $15 million to veteran organizations, and $8 million to activists who were defrauded into participating. What about progressive advocacy solutions? Completely shut down. We seized all their assets and banned the principals from operating similar organizations. The consulting firm model they used is now being watched closely by federal regulators. William felt satisfied, but not vindicated. The money would help, but it couldn't undo harm done to veterans who missed critical medical appointments or communities manipulated into fighting against their own interests. Agent Kim, what's being done to prevent this from happening again? Several things. First, the FTC is implementing new disclosure requirements for organizations that receive foundation funding. Second, the IRS is conducting audits of tax-exempt organizations that fund political activities. Third, Congress is considering legislation requiring grassroots organizations to disclose their major funding sources. It was progress, but William knew determined bad actors would always find new ways to manipulate the system. After leaving the courthouse, William drove to the site where Citizens for Change protests had taken place. The intersection was now flowing normally, with clear signage directing traffic to the new Veterans Centre that had been completed 2 months ahead of schedule. The Veterans Centre was everything the original proposal had promised: comprehensive mental health services, job training programs, and transitional housing for homeless veterans. The facility was already serving over 300 veterans from across the region. William parked and walked into the centre's main lobby, where a bronze plaque caught his attention, dedicated to the veterans who refused to be silenced and the community members who stood with them in the fight for truth. Dr. Williams approached from across the lobby. "William, I was hoping I'd see you here today. How's the facility working out?" "Beyond our expectations. We're providing services that veterans couldn't access before, and community support has been incredible." Dr. Williams led William on a tour. The mental health wing included individual and group therapy rooms, a PTSD treatment center with latest virtual reality therapy equipment, and a crisis intervention unit staffed 24/7. "William, I want to show you something," Dr. Williams said, leading him to a wall covered with thank you letters. "These are from veterans receiving care here. Many specifically mention your fight to keep the facility from being blocked." William read several letters, feeling deep satisfaction. One from veteran Michael Torres particularly moved him. "Mr. Johnson, I don't know if I would have survived my crisis if this facility hadn't been built. Thank you for fighting for us when we couldn't fight for ourselves." "What's the status of veterans who were targeted for harassment during the protests?" "We've been able to provide specialized counseling for most of them. The FBI Victim Services Unit has been helpful in connecting them with resources. But William, there's something else I wanted to discuss." They walked to Dr. Williams' office, where he pulled out a thick folder. "VA headquarters has been following your case closely. They want to create a national program to identify and respond to threats against veterans' facilities." "What kind of program?" "Early warning systems to detect manufactured opposition to veterans' services, training for VA staff to recognize astroturfing operations, and rapid response protocols to protect veterans' access to care." The system breakdown was complete, but from its ashes, something better was being built. 1 year after the federal courthouse steps where he'd first announced his lawsuit, William Johnson stood at the same location, holding a very different kind of press conference. This time, he wasn't fighting for justice. He was announcing the creation of the Veterans Access Defense Initiative, a national program that would protect veteran communities from manufactured activism. Morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse plaza as reporters, veterans, and community activists gathered for the announcement. Behind William stood representatives from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and veteran organizations from across the country. 12 months ago, I was just a veteran trying to get to a medical appointment, William began, his voice carrying across the crowd. Today, we're launching a program that will ensure no veteran ever again faces the kind of manipulation and obstruction that this community experienced. The Veterans Access Defense Initiative represented everything William had hoped to achieve when he first started fighting back against Rebecca Thornton's manufactured protest. The program included early warning systems to detect astroturfing operations, rapid response protocols to protect veterans' facilities, and educational resources to help communities distinguish between authentic activism and manufactured outrage. Dr. Williams stepped up to the microphone. The program that Mr. Johnson helped develop has already prevented 3 similar operations from targeting veterans' facilities in other cities. We now have the tools to identify and respond to these threats before they can harm veteran access to care. Agent Kim followed with an update on the broader impact of the Thornton case. Federal prosecutors have used precedents established in this case to shut down astroturfing operations in 8 states. We've recovered over $15 million in fraudulent donations and returned those funds to the communities that were targeted. But the most powerful moment came when Jessica Martinez, the former Citizens for Change protester, who had become an advocate for authentic activism, addressed the crowd. "I want every genuine activist to understand what happened here," Jessica said. "We were used. Our passion for justice was exploited to serve the interests of someone who didn't care about our causes. William Johnson didn't just expose a fraud, protected the integrity of grassroots activism itself." After the press conference, William drove to the Veterans Center that had been at the heart of the original conflict. The facility was now operating at full capacity, providing comprehensive services to over 800 veterans from across the region. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been an empty lot surrounded by manufactured controversy was now a thriving center of veteran support and community engagement. William walked through the facility's main corridor, past the mental health wing where veterans received PTSD counseling, the job training center where former service members learned new skills, and the transitional housing unit that provided temporary shelter for homeless veterans. In the lobby, he stopped at a new Additioner memorial wall dedicated to the veterans who had been affected by the road blockages during the Citizens for Change protests. Each name was accompanied by a brief description of how the facility had helped them recover from the delays in their care. Michael Torres, the veteran whose thank you letter had moved William so deeply, was now working as a peer counselor at the facility. He approached William with a smile. "Mr. Johnson, I wanted to thank you again, not just for fighting for this facility, but for showing us that we don't have to accept injustice just because it's wrapped in good intentions." "You don't need to thank me, Michael. You and every veteran here earned this facility through your service. I just made sure you could access it." Michael's expression grew serious. "Sir, there's something I want you to know. Before this facility opened, I was planning to end my life. The crisis intervention services here saved me. If Rebecca Thornton had succeeded in stopping this place from being built..." William felt a lump in his throat. The stakes of the fight had never been abstract, but hearing the personal impact made it real in a way that courtroom victories never could. Later that afternoon, William met with Lisa Martinez at her law office to review the final settlements from the federal case. The conference table was covered with documents outlining the distribution of the $43 million in restitution that Rebecca Thornton had been ordered to pay. "The veteran organizations are getting their share of the settlement," Lisa reported. $15 million distributed to VA hospitals, veteran service organizations, and individual veterans who were harmed by the protests. What about the activists who were deceived? $8 million to grassroots organizations that can prove they were harmed by the astroturfing operations. Jessica Martinez's new organization received a significant grant to develop authentication tools for genuine activist movements. The victory was complete and vindicated. Rebecca Thornton's network of manufactured activism had been not just defeated, but transformed into a national defense against similar manipulation. William Johnson had started by trying to get to a medical appointment. He was ending by helping protect the integrity of grassroots democracy across the entire country. 2 years after the intersection blockade that changed everything, William Johnson sat in a conference room at the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington, D.C., briefing federal agents on the latest astroturfing investigation. The case involved a manufactured environmental protest in Colorado that was actually funded by developers trying to prevent affordable housing construction. The pattern is identical to what we saw in the Thornton case. William explained to the assembled agents. Professional organizers with no local connections, sophisticated equipment exceeding their claimed budget, and funding sources hidden behind consulting firms. Agent Kim, now leading the DOJ's Domestic Astroturfing Task Force, nodded in agreement. Mr. Johnson's methodology has helped us identify 17 similar operations nationwide. We're now able to spot these fake grassroots campaigns before they cause significant harm. The transformation of William's life over the past 2 years had been remarkable. What started as a veteran trying to access medical care had evolved into a national expert on manufactured activism. He split his time between his cybersecurity consulting work and his role as a Justice Department consultant, traveling across the country to train agents and help communities identify fake grassroots operations. After the briefing, William drove to Arlington National Cemetery, where he was meeting Dr. Williams and several other veterans for the dedication of a memorial garden honoring veterans who had died by suicide while waiting for mental health care. The garden was located in a quiet section of the cemetery, with benches arranged in a circle around a fountain dedicated to the healing power of community support. A bronze plaque at the center bore the inscription, "For those we lost while help was delayed, and for those who fight to ensure it never happens again." Dr. Williams approached William as he stood reading the inscription. "William, I wanted to update you on the impact of the Veterans Access Defense Initiative. What are the numbers? We've now prevented manufactured opposition to veteran facilities in 15 cities. The early warning system you helped develop has identified suspicious protest activities before they could disrupt medical access." William felt deep satisfaction. The program had grown far beyond what he'd imagined when he first suggested it. What about the veterans who were affected by the original protests? All 247 veterans who missed appointments have received full care. The 12 who needed crisis intervention are stable and thriving. 3 of them are now working as peer counselors, helping other veterans navigate the system. Dr. Williams paused, his expression growing more serious. "William, there's something else. The VA has been tracking suicide rates among veterans in communities that experienced astroturfing operations. In every case where fake protests delayed medical access, there was a measurable increase in veteran suicide attempts. The statistics were sobering. William thought about Michael Torres and the other veterans who had been helped by the facility. Without access to timely care, some of them might not have survived." Later that afternoon, William visited Jessica Martinez at the headquarters of her organization, Authentic Activism Alliance. The group had grown from a small local organization to a national network focused on helping communities distinguish between genuine grassroots movements and manufactured campaigns. "William, I wanted to show you our latest project," Jessica said, leading him to a computer workstation where several young activists were analyzing social media campaigns. "We've developed an algorithm that can detect the signatures of astroturfed campaigns," she explained. "Unusual funding patterns coordinated messaging, professional equipment that doesn't match, claimed budget Saul the red flags you taught us to look for. William reviewed their work with admiration. The young activists had taken his basic investigation methodology and turned it into sophisticated detection tools that could identify fake grassroots campaigns in real time. We've already used it to expose 3 manufactured campaigns, Jessica continued. A fake environmental protest in Oregon that was actually funded by a competing business, a false affordable housing opposition in Texas that was financed by luxury developers, and a manufactured school board controversy in Florida that was orchestrated by political consultants. What happened to those campaigns once you exposed them? They collapsed immediately. Once communities understood they were being manipulated, the fake support evaporated. The real lesson of your case is that the truth really does set people free. That evening, William returned to his hometown for a community celebration marking the 2nd anniversary of the Veterans Center opening. The facility had become a model for veteran care nationwide, with delegations from other cities visiting to learn from its comprehensive approach. The celebration was held at the intersection where the Citizens for Change protests had once blocked traffic. The city had installed a small memorial plaque commemorating the importance of community vigilance against manufactured activism. Jake Morrison served as master of ceremonies, introducing speakers who had been part of the fight against the fake protests. 2 years ago, this intersection was blocked by people who claimed to fight for justice while actually serving the interests of a billionaire who didn't want veterans in her neighborhood. Jake said to the assembled crowd, "Today, it's a symbol of what communities can accomplish when they refuse to be manipulated." The aftermath was better than William had ever imagined. The intersection was clear. The truth had prevailed, and democracy was stronger because one veteran had refused to accept that billionaires could manufacture grassroots movements. 5 years after that Wednesday morning when William Johnson was first blocked from accessing his VA appointment, he stood before a packed auditorium at Georgetown University's School of Public Policy. The lecture hall was filled with students, community organizers, journalists, and government officials who had come to hear him speak about defending democracy in the age of manufactured activism. William looked out at the audience, many of them young faces, eager to learn how to distinguish between authentic grassroots movements and sophisticated manipulation campaigns. In the front row sat Jessica Martinez, now pursuing a master's degree in public policy while continuing to run her Authentic Activism Alliance. 5 years ago, I was just a veteran trying to get to a medical appointment, William began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium. I had no idea that my frustration with a blocked intersection would lead to exposing a multi-million-dollar network of fake grassroots operations. He clicked to his first slide, showing a photo of the intersection where Citizens for Change had staged their protests. But this story isn't really about me. It's about what happens when communities refuse to accept that their democracy can be purchased and manipulated by those with enough money to manufacture outrage. William had given this lecture dozens of times over the past 2 years, but it never got old. Each audience brought new questions, new insights, and new energy to the fight against manufactured activism. The most important lesson from the Thornton case is this: authentic grassroots movements and astroturfed campaigns have different signatures. Real activism emerges organically from community concerns. Fake activism is imposed from the outside with professional organization and hidden funding. A student raised her hand. Mr. Johnson, how can ordinary citizens develop the skills to investigate these operations the way you did? William smiled. It was always his favorite question. You don't need special training to ask basic questions. Who's funding this organization? Where did their equipment come from? Are the organizers actually from this community? Do their stated goals match their actual actions? He clicked to a slide showing the methodology he developed, now known as the Johnson Protocol, and taught at law enforcement academies nationwide. The key is documentation. Take photos, save screenshots, research corporate connections. The truth is usually hiding in plain sight in public records. After the lecture, William met with Dr. Emily Chen, the university's Director of Community Organizing Studies, who had invited him to speak. "William, your case has become essential reading in our curriculum," Dr. Chen explained as they walked across campus. "Students need to understand how authentic movements can be undermined by well-funded imitation campaigns. What are they learning? That democracy requires vigilance. That citizens have both the right and the responsibility to question who's behind the movements that affect their communities. Your fight showed that one person with the right skills and determination can expose even sophisticated manipulation campaigns." That evening, William returned to his hometown for a special dinner at the Veterans Center. The facility was celebrating its 5th anniversary, and the community had organized a celebration honoring the veterans and supporters who had fought to protect it. Dr. Williams greeted William at the entrance. "I have some remarkable statistics to share with you tonight. Good news, I hope?" "Extraordinary news. This facility has now served over 30 veterans. We've prevented an estimated 47 veteran suicides through our crisis intervention program. And the Veterans Access Defense Initiative you helped create has protected veteran facilities in 37 cities." William felt overwhelmed by the scope of the impact. What had started as a personal fight for medical access had become a national movement protecting veterans' rights. Michael Torres, now the facility's peer counseling coordinator, stood up to address the crowd. "5 years ago, I was planning to end my life because I couldn't access the mental health care I needed. Today, I'm helping other veterans find hope and healing. This facility exists because William Johnson refused to accept that billionaires could manufacture obstacles to veteran care." As the celebration wound down, William walked through the Veterans Center one final time. The facility hummed with quiet activity veterans, attending evening support groups, families using the recreational facilities, staff preparing for the next day's programs. William's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "William, my documentary about the astroturfing case just got picked up by Netflix. Your story is going to reach millions of people who need to understand how to protect their communities." William smiled as he typed his response. The more people who understand these tactics, the harder it becomes for bad actors to use them. As he drove home, William reflected on the journey from that frustrating Wednesday morning to this celebration of community resilience. His PTSD symptoms had largely subsided, replaced by a sense of purpose and community connection that he'd thought he'd lost forever after his military service. The intersection where it all began was now a normal part of the community landscape, with steady traffic flowing to and from the Veterans Center. His phone rang one last time. Captain Amanda Rodriguez, from the Army's Information Operations Command. "Mr. Johnson, we've been following your work on astroturfing detection. We'd like to discuss having you train our officers in defending against domestic information manipulation campaigns." William considered the offer. The military connection felt like a natural evolution of his work. "Captain Rodriguez, I'd be honored to help." "Excellent. I want you to know that your case has become required reading at the War College. Officers need to understand that the threats to American democracy aren't always foreign in origin. The legacy was secure. The lessons had been learned. And somewhere out there, in communities across the country, other citizens were applying those lessons to protect their own democracy. William Johnson had started by trying to get to a medical appointment. He was ending by helping protect the very foundation of democratic participation. Sometimes the most important battles were the ones you never planned to fight.